Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Mike's DVDs and Blu-rays collection. I'm your host, Mike. Today I'm going to spotlight a director, Howard Hawks. He's probably one of my favorite directors from the golden age of Hollywood and on up. He's been a big influence on directors of our day, Quentin Tarantino, Scorsese, Peter Bogdanovich, people like that. He's been a big influence on, and he made so many good movies. He was a director that started in the mid to late 20s making movies. He was a pilot in World War I. He was an experienced pilot, and he was also a director that could be left alone, kind of like John Ford, where he could direct and make the movies he wanted to make, but make them in the studio system, which was kind of hard back in those days to have maverick filmmakers because the studios would come down on them. But as long as he would continue to put out great movies, hit movies that made money, they left him alone. So he invented some of the, blockbuster type movies in a way. He was just made some great movies, worked with some of the greatest stars ever known, and we're left with a huge list of great movies. So that's why today I wanted to really spotlight Howard Hawks. He's done so many good movies. So let's start today with a Western from 1959, which really, I don't need to go into this. This is one of the best Westerns ever made in the 1950s or on. It's one of my favorite John Wayne movies. This movie's called Rio Bravo. It also stars Dean Martin and Ricky Nelson. And it's got a great supporting role by Walter Brennan, which is one of my favorite parts of the movie. This has also been called a hangout movie by Quentin Tarantino, which is a movie that it's basically a movie you love to put on and hang out with these people, because it's a movie where they're hanging out basically and talking, and that's where you really get to listen to the dialogue and know these people. And but yeah, 1959. It also stars Angie Dickinson. It's got what's his name? Pedro Gonzalez, and just a great cast in this. Such a great, legendary movie. More or less, John Carpenter, the director John Carpenter, made Halloween, was a big fan of this movie, and he more or less remade Rio Bravo as Assault on Precinct 13 back in 1974, I think it was. And he was such a big fan and stuff, and even Howard Hawks remade his own movie a couple of times. He made Rio Bravo, Rio Lobo, and God, I always forget the other Rio, but they were all basically the same story. And but yeah, Rio Bravo is just one of those great, beautifully filmed Technicolor movies from Warner Brothers that just are just great movies. You love to put them on. And at 2 hours and 21 minutes, it seems like it's not on that long. It's just a great watch. I love this movie. A lot of people love this movie, and it's a great example of Howard Hawks. But there's much more. He made a lot of movies. And in the year 1939 was one of the greatest years in Hollywood history. So many classics were made in 1939. For example, Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, Gunga Din, so many famous movies. And I feel like this movie kind of falls under the radar a little bit sometimes, but this is a movie called Only Angels Have Wings. This came out in 1939, and this is the Criterion Collection Blu-ray edition. It stars Cary Grant, Jean Arthur. It's got a great cast. It's got a young Rita Hayworth in it. Basically takes place in the jungle region. I'm not really sure where it's at, but it deals with an outpost, a male outpost where they're sending out mail and receiving, and it's basically the pilots against the weather. It's a dangerous job, and it shows everything, and it's one of the movies where Cary Grant really became Cary Grant in working with Howard Hawks. He basically formed the Cary Grant persona that we know. Working with Howard Hawks, he would make Bringing Up Baby and His Girl Friday all around this same time, and really invented the persona of Cary Grant. And it's such a great movie. It's one of those movies that you just have to watch it and you'll fall in love with it like me. So the next time Criterion Collection goes on sale for 50% off at Barnes & Noble, check it out before it goes out of print. And I think you'll discover it and really enjoy it. Next up, I have a release from Indicator, Powerhouse Indicator from the UK. This came out in the last 4 or 5 months. This is a movie from 1931 called The Criminal Code. And this would be one of the best prison movies. It's definitely one of the one of the 30s for sure. And it stars one of the best actors we had at that time, Walter Huston, who's the father of director John Huston, and he stars in this. And it's basically a prison drama. It's got a role, a small role, got Boris Karloff in it. Now that same year, 1931, he would make Frankenstein. So these were both out around the same time, and Frankenstein made him a star, but we forget he was in this. But this is a great release from Indicator. It's just loaded with stuff. There's a lot of talk about the movie. There's some discussing the career of Boris Karloff, of course, Howard Hawks. John Carpenter talks about Howard Hawks on here, and a bunch of other stuff on here. It's loaded with stuff. It's a great release. It's got a great booklet, and I highly recommend that, The Criminal Code. I also want to say on this edition of Only Angels Have Wings, it has the 1972 interview with Peter Bogdanovich that he did with Howard Hawks, talking about his career that became kind of semi-famous as one of the rare early documentaries of directors that were starting to be celebrated in the 1970s and stuff. But that's excerpts from that interview is on that as extras. So next up, in 1940, Cary Grant would make a movie with Howard Hawks, and it would co-star Rosalind Russell, and it would be His Girl Friday. It was a movie that moved at a frantic pace. The dialogue is just rapid fire dialogue, and you can see the influence on Quentin Tarantino's writing style from this as an example from this movie. This is the Criterion Collection Blu-ray edition. It's loaded with stuff. This is a new 4K digital restoration of the movie. It also has the original 1931 version of the story called The Front Page. That's what the story was originally called, the Front Page. He changed it to His Girl Friday and made a better role for Rosalind Russell, which he's credited as giving really good roles to women back then. But in a time when they were more subservient people to the male star, so he was credited as really recognizing some women actors, women's actors, actresses back then. Sorry, and stuff. So you can really see that where they changed the front page story from two guys talking to Rosalind Russell and Cary Grant. They play divorced couple that works at a newspaper. They're covering the execution of a guy. It just turns into one of the best comedies ever made. It's a really good movie. It's a movie to come back to. All of these movies will be movies you could come back to and watch. But I really want to show that off. This is actually a new release. I've never had a decent copy of His Girl Friday because it was always like a public domain title. And I finally waited long enough and got the good restored version. So I'm really pleased with this. Really good release. Next up, I have another release from Indicator. This is actually from 1934. This is a movie called 20th Century, and it stars Carole Lombard and John Barrymore. And it was it's a movie that they say created the screwball comedy. So Howard Hawks he's made 2 comedies that were credited as creating the whole screwball thing, along with Frank Capra with It Happened One Night. Basically invented a new genre of movie, the screwball movie. The other movie he made being Bringing Up Baby, but this is the other one that we don't really hear a lot about, but it's a very, very, very funny movie. Carole Lombard is hilarious in this. John Barrymore gives one of his best comedic performances, and as with all Indicator releases, it's loaded up with a lot of stuff here. It's also got some stuff with Peter Bogdanovich. Kind of gives it a little appreciation. Talks about it a little bit. But yeah, it's a great release. Before it goes out of print, which Indicators are known to go out of print, grab you a copy of 20th Century. I think you will thank me later for it. So 20th Century, guys. Next up, we have a movie during World War II. All the directors were getting involved with making their World War II movie, more or less. And Howard Hawks in 1943 would make a movie that's called Air Force. This is from Warner Archive Collection. This is a DVD edition of it. It's a great war pick. It's got a young, I guess John Garfield had been around for a while. I think he debuted in like 1938 in movies, but he'd been around for a few years. But John Garfield, Gig Young, Harry Carey, George Tobias. It's got a young Arthur Kennedy, John Ridgely. But yeah, this is I think it's produced it's produced by the legendary Hal B. Wallace, but this was a big, almost epic World War II movie during World War II. So this was a big movie focusing on the Air Force and the bomber pilots and all the stuff. They used an actual bomber that would later still be used in the war effort, and it would later get shot down. But the plane they're basically shown in most of the movie was an actual bomber, and it was actually shot down later on during the war in the next couple years or so. So there you go. There's a movie called Air Force. I think you'll enjoy that. He made movies. He made westerns and war movies and comedies, and I don't think he made any musicals. He may have made a couple musicals, but he basically made a little bit of everything. And here's a movie I just brought up a little bit about a minute ago. This is the newer release from Criterion Collection of Bringing Up Baby. This is the 1938 screwball comedy classic that Howard Hawks made with Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. This, along with His Girl Friday, what's the other movie? I'm trying to think. What was that movie? That kind of invented the Cary Grant persona. This was one of the first movies he made that could really show how funny he could be. You know what I mean? Like, really shows his comedic acting chops. And Katharine Hepburn's never been funnier in a movie. This is a really good addition. It's newer. It's loaded with stuff. This was an upgrade for me. I had it on DVD, but it's got a lot of cool stuff on here. It's got an interview with cinematographer John Bailey. He's talking about the cinematographer on here, Russell Meddy, who was a famous cinematographer during the 30s and 40s. But what can I say about Bringing Up Baby? It's a classic. It's so funny. It's just rip-roaring. It just moves at a fast pace, and it's just hilarious. The dialogue is just fast and furious, and just it's just made for repeat viewings. It's just a movie. The dialogue is so good. Such a funny movie. Bringing Up Baby. If you haven't got it, you need to get it. And if you haven't seen it, you need to see it. And finally, guys, I want to focus on another comedy that he made. This is maybe a lesser known comedy out there, but this was a movie made in 1941. He made this movie for the Samuel Goldwyn Studios. This is a movie called Ball of Fire. It stars Gary Cooper and Barbara Stanwyck. Script by Billy Wilder, who would later become a director in the next year, 1942, with The Major and the Minor. That would be Billy Wilder's first movie. But he was part of the script. Let's see, yeah, original story by Billy Wilder and Thomas Monroe. The screenplay he worked on with Charles Brackett, who he would go on to work on scripts for his own movies, Billy Wilder. But this was one of the last movies he would write before, becoming his own director. But Howard Hawks went into making this as kind of a variation of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Basically, you got Barbara Stanwyck, who's basically like a gangster's mall, like a girl. She's hiding out with these guys, these older men who are college professors. They're all these nerdy, elderly men trying to write a dictionary of slang, trying to write a book on slang of that time period, in 1940 slang and stuff. So they're all in this house with Gary Cooper being the youngest of the bunch, and they're all basically really nerdy people, and Barbara Stanwyck comes in and just turns them all upside down, and it's a great movie. I feel like it doesn't get its fair. I don't know. I don't think people ever talk about it. Barely ever talk about it. But this is a DVD edition that Warner Brothers put out in 2014, actually. It doesn't have any extras or anything on it, but I remember seeing this back in my very early days of being a classic movie fan, probably 1991 or 92 or something like that. I remember because I was a big fan of Billy Wilder back then. Back when I was like 14, 15, I was a big fan of Billy Wilder, and I was trying to find everything he was ever associated with, movies he wrote, movies he directed, and everything. So Ball of Fire, I'm glad I discovered it. It was cool that Howard Hawks was directed or associated with it. I think if anybody knows dialogue and just actors, it's Howard Hawks. He just does such a great job. But yeah, Ball of Fire. It's a movie you may not have heard of, but it's to me it's a classic. It's definitely underrated. But there you go, guys. There's just some of Howard Hawks' many classic movies and underrated classics and everything. Of course, he did a bunch of different movies. He made westerns like Red River and so many movies he made. But that was just a few. I just wanted to show off. Some of those were new to me. Those Criterions were newer, and I just wanted to show those off. Kind of get you in the mood for some Howard Hawks. So go out there and find you some Howard Hawks. Most of his movies are on video, And one day I would like to get all of his work and get all of them. I have many other Howard Hawks movies, but I just wanted to show a few, give you kind of a taste of Howard Hawks. So I hope you enjoyed this salute to Howard Hawks. If you really enjoyed it, give me a thumbs up, and make sure you comment, let me know what you thought. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, subscribe today and hit that bell so you're notified when I release a new video. So that's about it, guys. So stay safe out there. Keep watching classic movies. Keep laughing. And I will see you guys again in another episode. Goodbye, guys.